I'm Cheryl Angeles, the President and CEO of the San Mateo Area Chamber of Commerce. And welcome this beautiful morning. I'm going to let Pauline do the introduction, and you'll be muted throughout the program. And then at the end, Pauline will open it up for questions.
Okay, thank you, Cheryl. And I'm Pauline. I'm the Director of Communications and Marketing. Intro to Jen. Jen's a debit and credit attorney and owner of Jen Lee Law. It's a law firm with offices in San Francisco, San Ramon, and Tracy. She is a leading expert on debt, credit, and financial stress, having been featured in Consumer Affairs, U.S. News and World Reports, and other national publications. Jen is of several innovative programs to deal with financial stress and rebuilding after financial disaster. Employees are assets in the name of her corporate program addressing financial stress in the workplace. It's estimated that employers lose $7,000 per year per employee due to the employee's financial stress, and Jen is helping to solve their problem. Jen's co-author of Preventing Credit Card Fraud, a complete guide for everyone from merchants to consumers. It was published by Rowman and Littlefield in March of 2017. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jen. You can use the chat box as Cheryl indicated. Thank you very much.
And I will share my PowerPoint. As you notice, I do have a huge elephant behind me. My background is a virtual green screen. I can't get her any smaller, so that's how big she is. But she's in real life, she's about 12 inches stuffed animal. And she is a real thing that comes with me to most of my meetings. And I talk about the elephant in the room, and I'm going to go through, and let me play the slideshow from the start. I am a debt and credit attorney. In the attorney world, I'm technically a bankruptcy attorney, but what I found was that there are so many people out there with debt and credit issues that they don't need always bankruptcy, but they need someone to talk to figure out kind of what their options are. So the whole premise of this presentation came up when I started talking about how much finances affect relationships, how it affects your health, how it affects the workplace. And the overarching theme is that it weighs all of those areas down because a lot of people think they're alone. And that's where Bernadette comes into play. So her name is Bernadette, and she's the elephant in the room. And the idea of Bernadette came about because there were studies done that show that 70% of Americans have a debt or credit problem of some sort. And no one wants to talk about it. So it's this elephant that's there that no one talks about, that everyone thinks they're alone. You go on Facebook and all your friends and family are posting how great their lives are. They just took a trip to Maui. They bought a new Porsche, whatever. Something's on Facebook that looks great. Because if you go on Facebook and you post how bad things are, then everyone unfollows you, and you don't. That's not how it works. So that's how the elephant in the room came about. And so I tell people, picture every room you walk into, no matter if it's like the highest net worth people you know, or you know, low income clinic of some sort that you walk into. If you're an attorney, the elephant is there. And so Bernadette had headshots that were done a couple years ago. So these are a couple of her headshots and a copy of my book that she was with. But the whole premise of the elephant in the room is that you never know what everyone around you is struggling with. And I most often hear from clients, you can't tell anybody because they'll never understand. And I want to explain to them that they all also have the same problems. They just don't want to talk about it. So how it affects whatever room you walk into, there are elephants everywhere. The room is full of elephants. Debt, no one wants to talk about it. It's not fun to talk about. It's not sexy. This isn't a topic that gets a lot of people to come to a meeting, but it's a topic that when everyone leaves, they're like, oh, I wish I would have had, 10 other people here with me that could have heard this talk. And so no one wants to talk about it. Money is the leading cause of stress. And I've been giving this talk for 3.5 years now. And in the past 3 years, it's always been, oh, the economy is great. No one has any stress. Now with COVID, it's kind of taken a different turn. A lot of people are stressing now that weren't stressing before. So it's very timely these days. The whole elephant at work, I did a white paper back in 2017, and it's part of my resources on the last slide. And the Department of Labor did a study that shows that the employer's bottom line is impacted $7,000 per year per employee because of employee financial stress. And I thought that was pretty amazing that employers don't realize how much it's affecting their bottom line. And a lot of employers want to go, la, 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 I can't hear you. I'm not listening to this. This isn't my problem. And so I started talking about the elephant at work because surveys have shown that 80% of employees deal with their financial problems at work. And it may not be something as drastic as bankruptcy. If you've ever applied for a mortgage, all the documents you have to submit and resubmit and send in and write an explanation letter for, they're all doing that at work because they're stressed out about getting a mortgage or getting a refinance and that kind of thing. So it may not be something that's super drastic, but they're taking time out of work to deal with their financial issues because, first of all, they don't know how to get through things. And then second, it has to get done. Otherwise, they're going to be more financial stress. So what's the actual cost? In the US, it's $300 billion per year that it costs employers for financial stress of their employees. And that's due to, and I go through in a few minutes, all the things that affect the bottom line, but it can be anything from absenteeism, tardiness at work, making phone calls at work, using the internet at work, all kinds of things. It's estimated at 150 hours per employee per year. It basically breaks down to 3 hours per week that each employee is using on their company time to do with their own finances. It also causes an increase in workers' compensation premiums. And I often get like a quizzical look on this one. The reason why is because employees who are stressed don't sleep. And when they don't sleep, they come to work and have accidents. So I have an example of a company I worked with a couple of years ago in Hayward, a manufacturing facility. And they had an employee who was very crucial to their production. And he ran a very expensive and dangerous piece of equipment. And he got a notice from his HR department that his wages were going to be garnished 25% for a collection account that he ignored. He had 6 kids. So instead of finding out what his options were and figuring out what to do with it, he didn't sleep for 4 nights, watched really bad late night television and those horrible commercials that try to scam people late at night, got to work that next morning on the 4th morning and fell asleep while operating this equipment. So he could never work again because of the accident. The workers' compensation premiums skyrocketed because the cost of that. And so the company then had to figure out if they could even stay in business and afford to stay in business. So it has a domino effect. And that was an extreme example, but the way we found that was the owner came to me and said, I don't know how I can keep operating with this workers' comp premium. Look how much it jumped. And I said, what happened? And then I got the whole story and figured out why their workers' comp premium had jumped so high. Increase in medical insurance premiums as well. I know healthcare and health insurance is Americans' favorite topic to talk about, especially these days, but 70% of illnesses are attributed to stress. And I do have a site for that at the end of the presentation as well. So literally finances are making people sick. The huge disconnect, and I think what a lot of people miss in the financial advising world and in the employer benefit world, is that financial literacy actually does not help someone already in crisis. So whenever I talk to someone, they're like, oh yeah, we have this great financial literacy program, we do budgeting, we have financial advisors who come in and talk about insurance. I'm like, you're actually making it worse. The people that need help are already in a situation where literacy only makes them feel worse about their situation because they think that there's nothing that they can do. And so they actually need crisis management and figuring out solutions to their current financial situation. Then they can go back and take advantage of financial literacy programs. And so there's this huge disconnect out there. And when I say it, people are like, oh yeah, that makes sense. But until I say it, people are like, oh yeah, we have great financial programs for our employees. So I really struggle with getting the word out there on that. So financial literacy programs, the buzzwords that you'll hear are budgeting. We're going to help you budget better. Money management, financial education, wealth protection, financial wellness. Financial wellness actually is one of my least favorite words in the whole world. Right now, next to social distancing. But anyway, financial wellness makes people feel unwell because they're struggling with their finances and they think these financial wellness programs are doing everything wrong. They're like, I can't contribute to my 401k. I can't do all these things. So I'm unwell, and it contributes to that mindset of stress. So those are the buzzwords. What are employees actually struggling with? Wage garnishments in California, they can take 25% of your gross income for wage garnishment. There are ways to offset that depending on level of income, but it's standard 25% of your gross income. 401k loans are probably my biggest pet peeve in the whole world. 401k loans, a lot of employers think they're doing their employees a favor by giving them options for 401k loans. In fact, I had a company a few years ago that was offering 3 401k loans at a time. And the employees would come in, they would get the 3 loans, their entire check would go to 401k loans. And then they'd have to go back and do it again. It's a horrible payday loan cycle that comes in with these 401k loans. So that's a huge issue. And I often tell employers, if you look through your list of employees with 401k loans, that give you an idea of how much financial stress is within your employees. Past due taxes. I often get past due tax issues with 1099, people that are actually independent contractors, not employees, or self-employed. Student loans. So I think the number is actually higher than $1.5 trillion in student loans. It's probably closer to 1.7 trillion now because it's compounding. Student loans are a huge issue. Even in companies that pay really well, they still have student loan issues with their employees. Credit card lawsuits, getting served at work has always been an issue for employees. And then foreclosure, if someone's going through a foreclosure, their mind is not on whatever their work job is supposed to be doing. Getting a mortgage, that goes back to my example of when someone's at work trying to send in all their documents because their mortgage broker asked for a blood sample as the next item. So that's what they're trying to go through and figure out. And then identity theft. So it's not even the employee's fault. Everything else you can kind of say, okay, the employees got themselves there, they need a way to get out. But identity theft isn't even their fault, but it happens a lot these days. And so that can take months to fix and is a huge pain in the butt. Some red flags or warning signs in the workplace. So if you're an employer or you're an HR manager, I always tell people to look out for these red flags, 401k loans, requests for salary advances. I don't think big companies do that, but I have a lot of mom and pop shops that will actually still do salary advances. And so if you're getting requests for salary advances constantly, financial stress, internet activity. So I hadn't thought of this one until I had an IT company ask me specifically. We did some searches to see what our employees were searching for, and debt collection came up as one of their top searches, or how do I get out of a lawsuit kind of thing. And so internet activity, whatever your employees are searching for can be a clue. Personal phone calls, I get a lot of, now these days with cell phones, it's not as easy to spot. When I was working at AIG 20 years ago, we didn't have cell phones back in the olden days. And I always had employees that were always whispering on their phone. I was trying to figure out what was going on. And then I found out later that they had collection agencies calling them at work. Collection phone calls to HR, wage garnishments that show up at HR, unexplained absences, tardiness, and then the worst is when the process server shows up at work to serve an employee with a collections lawsuit. So moving on from the productivity in the workplace, talking about the elephant in relationships, 44% of divorces are due to financial stress. And almost 75% of Americans are experiencing financial stress at least some of the time in studies. And then 25% are experiencing extreme financial stress. These numbers are pre-COVID. So I would say that these numbers are probably elevated at this point just because of the unknown of what's going on out there. But I want people to think about what that does to their relationship and how much tension it puts in a relationship. And also what it does to the kids. Almost all of the people who come into my office and say that they have financial issues, they will always tell me, oh, our kids know nothing about this. Our kids, we don't share our money problems with them. We don't want them knowing that there's any problems. The kids know. And I'll tell you how the kids know, because I was one of those kids whose parents had money problems. And I never knew if we would go to the grocery store, if they would take our check, because we would have to walk out sometimes without groceries. My parents' car got repossessed while I was playing softball one time. Kids know, even if you don't tell them, there are hints out there. And so I'm a big economics nerd. And if there's anyone here who likes economics, the crab pot theory is often used to kind of display why this is a generational issue, why it happens over and over and over again. The crab pot theory is, so when you're going to do a crab feed or boil up some crabs, you throw them in alive, and one of them eventually starts climbing out. And at the point where one of them is almost ready to make its break, what do all the rest of the crabs do? Pulls the crab back down to boil and die in the water. It's a very extreme way of looking at things, but that's what happens in most family situations. Parents always say they want their kids to get ahead, but family has a way of pulling you back to their level. And so I often in my office will have 3 generations of grandparents, the children, the grandkids, because they're all repeating the exact same mistakes because that's what they were taught. Even if it was not intentionally, that's what they saw. So the relationship problems that I see in my office when I'm talking about debt and credit, budgeting, hiding spending, oftentimes there'll be a spouse who's a spender and one who's a saver, because opposites do tend to attract. It's really hard when you get 2 spouses that are spenders because it's hard to balance that. I also see a lot of spouses, and not to stereotype, but it often tends to be a wife of a husband and wife relationship that doesn't know their finances, doesn't know how much credit card debt they have. And I've had couples come in and he'll tell me ahead of time, she has no idea that we have $50,000 in credit card debt, or she has no idea that we owe taxes for the last 5 years. And my question always is, well, you signed the taxes, didn't you at least read them? But people just sign things. And so the relationship problems then become, they don't want to talk about it. The habits, it's hard to talk about how to get out of it. You don't want to admit that you're the one with the problem. And so I see a lot of hiding money, spending. There's a lot of financial abuse that happens. I'm doing more and more of those cases with a crossover into family law with domestic violence, because there is just so much with finances that you can really hide and abuse. So it causes problems. Then there's the elephant in your health. So these numbers on here, 70% of illnesses are attributed to stress. 76% of stress is finances. So again, finances are literally making people sick. And it's hard for me to believe sometimes, but then I see it in my office. So a lot of times I'll have someone come in, and seniors these days, I would say probably 60% of my clients are 55 and older. And a lot of it's lack of retirement savings, or they took out student loans for their kids for college, and now they're trying to pay back $200,000 of student loans. It's really getting stressful in that age bracket. So I have clients who will come in and they're all hunched over, and they'll be you can see the stress emanating off of them. And by the time we're done, they're sitting up, they're relaxed. You can tell it's like a release. It's a physical release that happens when they realize that there are options for them. But how it manifests itself in their daily lives is fatigue, headache, upset stomach, muscle tension. I have fibromyalgia clients who we solve a lot of the stress issues in their fibromyalgia. The pain gets less for it. I'm not a doctor, but that stress response is physical. And so I had a lady probably 3 years ago now, and she came in and she told me, I haven't slept in like 30 days. She's like, we have this credit card debt. Our house is still underwater, living in the Bay Area. So they still owed more on their house than it was worth. And she's like, I can't even sleep anymore. And we filed a Chapter 7 bankruptcy for her. And I caught up with her at her hearing, because we had to go to a meeting in Oakland. And the first thing she said to me when she walked in the door was, I have slept every single night for 30 days since we met and filed this bankruptcy. And so that was speaking to me on the stress response. And she looked like 10 years younger too, because she wasn't all the bags under her eyes. And you could tell that she was having a physical response to how stressful it was. So people underestimate the amount of stress it causes in their bodies. And I often will tell people that we need to solve that problem before we can solve some of the health issues and other things that are going on. It's hard to tell what the underlying issue is. So not to be all doom and gloom, I like to talk about the reasons why I talk about financial stress so much, because it's not a fun topic. I do have an elephant that makes it cute and cuddly. I do have the elephant in my office. People literally cuddle with the elephant while they're talking to me. It's debt therapy. But what can we do about it? So the first thing I do about it is I talk about it. I will talk to anyone who will listen. You have a chamber, you have a Rotary Club, you have a financial executives group, financial advisors. I did a group last week for 30,000 nationwide financial advisors. And I will talk about it to anyone who will listen, because the more you talk about it, the more normalized it is and people aren't scared of it anymore. And then understanding it's not all about financial literacy. I have given this talk in clubs, Rotary clubs, especially in very affluent areas. And someone inevitably will raise their hand and be like, well, if they had just budgeted better, they wouldn't be in that situation. That's not true. I have clients, it's no fault of their own, the way they got into their situation. It could be a generational thing. Like I said, they never taught. So understanding that just going in and teaching people about budgeting is not going to solve the problem. And then if this speaks to you or someone in your family, get help. Ask for solutions. I don't care if you ask me for advice, but find out what you can actually do instead of carrying around that weight. I have had clients sit down in my office for an hour. I explained everything to them, went through all of their options, and they literally skipped down the hall out of my office. And they're like, why didn't we come see you a year ago? We didn't know that we didn't have to live like this. And most common phrase uttered in my office is, I didn't know. I didn't know I could do something. I didn't know that that's what would happen if I talked to you. I didn't know. If this doesn't speak to you and you have the vacation house in Maui and you're driving a Porsche and you're all good, then help others. If someone tells you they're struggling with their finances, don't make them feel like a loser, because that's what they're afraid of. That's the biggest mind block when it comes to getting help, is they are worried about what everyone else will say. And then my final tip on here that I usually throw in for chamber and business organizations is run your business like a business. I cannot tell you how many business owners I have that come in that don't pay their taxes, that don't have a separate account for taxes, that have mixed personal and business into their business accounts, that have just done some really not good things with their business accounting. So if you run your business like a business, that will help to ease the stress as well when it comes to finances. Because if you're running a business, it's stressful enough as it is. Being self-employed and owning a company is probably one of the most stressful things in America right now. So run your business like a business. Resources, coming up on 10:25 here, so I'll leave 5 minutes for questions. The elephant in the room, I wrote a white paper back in August of 2017. And it's fairly short. It's only 10 pages and there's some graphics and stuff too. So it's not real super dense, but it talks about all these topics and why employers really should care about this more than they do care. And then PricewaterhouseCoopers does a employee financial wellness survey every year. My favorite words again, financial wellness. And the reason why I link to it is because you read through 70 pages of their beautiful infographics and it gets down to the bottom line. They never talk about actually solving the problem. They just talk about what they can sell to employers to do financial advising. So I like to see all the problems people are having, but then they don't propose a solution. And then the APA did a study back in 2014 that finances are literally making people sick. And that's where my statistics come from for the financial and health portion of this presentation. So I am happy to answer questions. If you want to talk about debt and credit, I can stop my screen share. I do have a employer program called Employees Are Assets that I'm happy to talk about if anyone ever wants to talk about how they can help their employees. But happy to answer any questions on debt, credit, financial stress, and all kinds of fun things with the last 5 minutes here. Or if there are no questions, that's fine too.